Hi, my name is Rachel Russell, and this is my video over prompt one for my master's portfolio. So, um, for my portfolio and my lessons, I focused on reading and social studies. I am a language arts teacher, and I integrate a lot of social studies and science into my lessons. So, two of the standards that I chose to work on, one of them for reading is quoting accurately from the text and explaining what the text says, and another one was determining the theme of a story and being able to pull details from the passage to include how characters in a story or drama respond to challenges that the speaker is reflecting upon and summarizing the text. The social studies standard that I'm incorporating is explaining how a citizen's rights are protected under the US Constitution. One thing I do is I write my standards into an ICANN statement or a learning target for students so they can better understand and know what they're actually going to be learning. So I also annotate these standards each time or every day before our lesson. So the first one would be I can quote accurately from a text, and what we would annotate is quote. So we understand that we need a specific detail, an exact detail from the passage, and accurately we focus on making sure that it is done correctly. I can describe how the chapter contributes to the overall structure of the story. So something that we've talked about since starting this unit is how every chapter in the book is connecting to the overall meaning of the story that we're reading. And each chapter has a purpose. So we're looking at how the chapter contributes. How does it help us understand? And then the overall structure would be each piece of the story. How does this chapter help us understand the beginning, the middle, the end, the climax, or the resolution of the story? And then finally, I can explain how a citizen's rights are protected under the US Constitution, which is going to be previewing information in social studies for students during my lessons. We would typically annotate explaining is showing our understanding, citizens' rights. Citizens are the people of the country. Our rights, things that we should be given. And then the Constitution, we've talked about that as well, which they are familiar with from years past. So student and teacher knowledge before the lesson. So teachers must understand how to guide students in analyzing characters' thoughts and feelings and their actions. They need to know how to model writing a character reaction paragraph, demonstrating the use of evidence from the text and explaining the connection between a character's motivation and their actual reaction. Additionally, teachers should be familiar with strategies for scaffolding paragraph writing and supporting students in moving from the observation phase to the interpretation phase. So an example for what we're working on is the observation is like thinking about what the character did in response to a human right being threatened. And then they're explaining how the character responded in that way. So one thing we are focusing on is the book Esperanza Rising. And in this book, students are reading. We're reading as a class. We're doing it as a read aloud. We're also doing a small group reading, and we're using it to influence our writing and reading skills. So not only are we practicing our reading standards right now, but all of this information is going to be basically building upon background information for our writing pieces later on, which are our monologues. So students are going to be understanding the story and then writing from a specific perspective over a different event. So as a teacher, I need to make sure I understand our students' reading and writing abilities and making sure I'm grouping them in the correct groups and preparing them for that project in the end. After instruction, students should be able to identify and describe the character's reaction in a story and what human rights were threatened. They should also be able to explain how the character reacted that way and connect the reaction to the events in the text and organize their thoughts into a paragraph about a character's reaction using evidence from the text to support their thinking. Those are our short responses. Later at the end of the whole unit, they will also be writing monologues as well to show how characters responded to their rights being threatened. So for differentiation, it means tailoring instruction to meet individual needs, whether through content, process, product, or learning environment, and relies on ongoing assessment and flexible grouping. This is cited from Reading Rockets. This is crucial for impactful learning opportunities for students. Classrooms are extremely diverse in areas of students' abilities, and if we cannot differentiate instruction, we risk leaving different types of learners out. Pedagogical knowledge involves choosing appropriate materials for students' abilities and modeling their expectations, and also developing strategies that they can use. So all these things are going to help students grow, and it's going to engage our learners. So I demonstrate PCK by choosing texts that are appropriate for my students. I try to model different types of strategies that I want students to use, such as annotating or citing evidence, proving their thinking. I feel that these types of practices let me meet the needs of students by balancing their deeper understanding and using the appropriate instructional approaches to meet each of their needs. A lot of this is done in small groups for me. I meet with small groups typically every single day, and I'll get to between 2 and 3 groups. And I do base my small groups off of ability and what each student needs, not necessarily what their reading level is, but what a student needs based off the content we're reading. So if students are having a difficult time annotating from the text, it could be someone at a very high level reading or a lower level reading. They are going to be grouped together as they are both working on that one specific standard. So it's not just my students that are struggling in lower level readers versus high level readers. It is based off the standard that we're focused on at that time. So one approach that I have been working on is guided reading, which is an effective approach to instruction. It's guided reading, which is small group practice where the teacher supports students in reading texts and they're at their instructional level, gradually releasing responsibility as students gain independence. And that's from Fontes and Pinnell. Best practices support guided reading because it provides differentiated support and fosters strategic reading skills in the structured environment. So what I do is pull my groups to really dig in deeper with my students and make them comfortable and make sure that they are given something that they can read or work with to show their abilities. If I am not taking their ability into consideration, they're not going to succeed. I am focused on making sure that they're learning the standard, and if I need to change the text and the levels to do that, then that is something that I would be focusing on. My rationale: read alouds are crucial for instruction because it gives students the ability to read more complex text, build vocabulary, build a stronger comprehension and understanding of the text. They also make it, we make it a full classroom experience by students reading and discussing what's happening in real time. This can benefit the lower level students as well as they're able to read and listen to on grade level text while achieving the higher level learners by giving them the ability to dig deeper into the book and discussing more with peers. So we do also do a lot of literature circles within our guided reading. So students are able to, we read as a whole class, we read in small groups, students read independently. And for this unit, because it was our first one this year, I focused in on a book that is read aloud and that students can go back and listen. It is a recorded read aloud as well. Strategies for monitoring my guided reading. These are ways that I've monitored this approach, is to stop and jot as we read. I am continuously annotating Post-its on what we're reading. I'm putting them on my board so students can share. Students that write their own annotations on Post-it notes can put them up on the board as well, and we do it by chapter. So that way we can all share and read over those annotations, because one student may think something another didn't, and they're basically learning off of each other and digging in deeper, and they are having some really great, genuine conversations based off that. So we'll take annotations in our journals, we'll take annotations on Post-its because we do share books, so we're not able to necessarily write in those. We also use what is a read to complete reading response questions, and students are able to write in a response in Google Classroom based off what they read and what they understood that day. And there's a list of different prompts that they can respond to. So here is some evidence of my first approach. Here is over to the left, you can see is a screenshot of the passage that I post on the board. Now, this is a website that I've been using that has a Esperanza read aloud. It is great as we will sit and read together as a class and stop and discuss in between pages and paragraphs, and students are able to dig in deeper. They have these great conversations, explaining what they're thinking, they're foreshadowing, they're inferencing. This is also a book that students can go back and reread later if they would like. So they're following along in their actual text. They're listening as well. So they're getting it in multiple ways to help build their comprehension and understanding. I do have a lot of students that are dual language speakers, and several this year. I have the most Spanish speaking students, which goes great with our read aloud because there are, as you can see in the photo, a lot of words that are written in Spanish. We use these students as our experts. They are our experts to class. They are the ones that we go to, and it also empowers them, which is wonderful. And they have this sense of confidence that they're building, knowing that the class is relying on them to be able to explain to us what certain words mean or customs and traditions that are built into this story. One thing I do like about this story that helps with my students is that, as you can see up here, you can pick what speed you want it read at, how quickly students can pause the reading and take down their annotations and notes as well. So my reflection for this approach, some strengths that I noticed using the read aloud strategy, it helps students model what fluent readers looks like and sounds like. They're able to not only listen to their groups when they read out loud, because they're not always just listening to the story on a recording. Sometimes we listen as a whole group to recording and then we stop and talk in groups. Sometimes we read it out loud in small groups. Sometimes I pull students and they read with me. Sometimes they're independent reading for the day. But being able to hear it and follow along has really helped with my students and the fluency, so they can hear what a fluent reader sounds like. Students are able to hear words pronounced correctly. A lot of times they'll read words, they'll pronounce them correctly. They may understand or not understand what it means. They're getting all of these pieces built into one. They can hear how the pace of the story is, what it should sound like, and they can also hear the expression of the reader to show what the characters are feeling in that time. It's very beneficial for upper elementary students, I feel, because they understand what most words mean, but they're able now to apply it to the correct pace and tone of how it's being used in the story, and also connect how that word is reflecting how a character may feel or respond or react. It also really helps, I've noticed, with building our comprehension and understanding as well. Some weaknesses that I noticed with the read aloud is that I did notice that some students do get distracted easily if it is a longer chapter and they're having a hard time focusing on the story and they're not actively reading on their own. They're not following along. They may start to doodle or stare off and look at something that's distracting to them. I've also noticed that the read aloud is not beneficial to students that are fast readers. They are reading ahead and not staying on the same pace. So then when we stop to discuss, sometimes they are giving out information that we have not gotten to yet as a class. And that can sometimes be difficult because it will ruin the story for the other students, or they don't like that. They want to understand and hear the story as they go, not to know ahead of time. It also causes some confusion with students as they're trying to understand what's happening in the moment of what we read, when others are relaying information that may happen later on that we haven't gotten to yet. So for my high achievers, the book that we're reading, Esperon's Rising, is actually really great for them. It is a higher level read if it is being read independently. It makes it great for these students that are often trying to figure out the words that are in Spanish. I noticed that a lot of my higher level thinkers have been trying to determine what those words mean by looking at prefixes and suffixes and thinking about words that they do know in Spanish and figuring out what it means in that context of the story. And something else that is great is that I have several of my high level achievers that are also Spanish speaking. So each group that we have based on ability typically always has a student that is fluent in Spanish, and they're able to kind of lead their group at this time. And students are working really hard to figure out what these words mean in Spanish without directly asking. So it's kind of been part of a game that they seem to really enjoy, and it's extremely beneficial for them. they're also learning on how to pronounce these words correctly as well. My struggling learners, I notice, are able to be given the ability to read a grade level text that they might not necessarily be able to read on their own. They can understand the story when it's being read aloud to them, and this is beneficial for them. So they are able to follow along in the story and listen to the read aloud, and it's really improving their comprehension and vocabulary, because many times they know what words are, they just may not know how they're spelled, and so when they read them, they don't put it together. But hearing it and reading it is building upon that for them. And I'm noticing that they are also like writing more in their journals when they're learning a word that they're not sure of. They have on their own created a whole section in their binder just for vocabulary of words that they are learning now. My second approach that I have is exit tickets. So for an exit ticket is used daily pretty much within my classroom. So exit slips are designed to quickly gauge students' understanding of material covered in a lesson, identify any areas of confusion, provide valuable feedback to me and the effectiveness of the instruction. We're using the exit tickets every day to help guide my small group instruction. It's helping me understand any misconceptions my students have in class, or that standard that's being covered each day. It also helps me better understand where I need to help my students. Where do I need more time focused and less time for understanding the material? If I do an exit ticket and everyone has a very good understanding of how to quote something correctly, maybe we don't need to spend an extra 2 days on that. Maybe we need to go back in and spend an extra day on summarizing a text instead, if this is what the class is having a more difficult time with. It also kind of gauges my small group. So I may have one small group that needs to work on quoting accurately, and 3 small groups that need to work on summarizing, or 2 small groups that may need to work on analyzing perspectives. For my rationale, I have exit tickets help teachers gain deeper understanding of mastery of the standard. I use exit tickets often in my classroom to help guide my small groups and rotations. They also help me change and differentiate my lessons to make sure all students are given the opportunity to master the standards. My strategies for monitoring exit tickets, some ways I use exit tickets are by having a couple quick multiple choice questions. There's also short writing responses. There's graphic organizers that I'm having students work on. And these are strong ways that teachers can actually monitor students in their exit tickets. Recently, we've been using some checklists in our exit tickets, and it gives students a list of items that they need to make sure are incorporated in their writing or their responses. This is one way that really helped me understand the students' understanding of what was supposed to be done and how well they understand it as well. Here are a couple pieces of evidence that I have. So the first one is the exit ticket for the story that we read. And as you can see, it's titled For Esperanza Rising. You have Esperanza's papa was killed because. So students had to finish the prompt based off the chapter that we read. So the goal that we spoke about is making sure that we do a quick, short response. So the student wrote a little bit more than what I was expecting, but it shows me that they have a deeper understanding. So the student, he wrote, Esperanza's papa was killed because of the bandits. I think that Tio Luis and Marco wanted bandits to kill him so they can have the farm. Tio Luis wanted to marry Mama. That is why Papa was killed. The uncles wanted to own all the land because they are greedy. The uncles took away Papa's human rights to life by having him killed. So this student showed me what was happening, why was Papa killed, the reasoning for it because of the uncles, and showing me the perspective of the uncles by showing that they wanted to take control of that family farm and wanted to convince Mama to marry them so they could gain control. I also really love how they incorporated the human rights of Papa being taken away by him losing his life, because that is something that we have been consistently talking about as well. You can also see that I have a checklist listed. This is one of the checklists we have been using that focuses on short responses that we use. It's not necessarily for this exact exit ticket that my students completed this day, but this was for a writing response for one of the assignments where they had to go in, the day after and check and make sure all these things were done correctly or added in. And they would check off yes or no to know during our writing workshop time if they needed to meet with me to figure out what we needed to add or take out. Here is an example of one of their writing pieces. And this is a monologue one of my students wrote. So I had to divide my class up into multiple small groups, and each group was given an event that happened within the book. Their goal was to all write in one group. So example, if they had to write out the immigration sweep was one of the events that happened in the story where human rights were being threatened. There was 4 different characters that were involved in that chapter. Each student had to write from a different character's perspective of what was happening and how that character was feeling during that moment in time and how their rights were being threatened. They had to use narrative writing techniques as well. So you would see one event unfold between the eyes of 4 different characters. So they had to work together as a group to make sure they all understood what was happening in the story, but they also had to do this independently because every character was experiencing this event in a different way. So here's my reflection for approach 2. So some strengths. A strength I noticed is that while using exit tickets in my classroom, it is allowing students to demonstrate their reflection skills. Students can look back at what they have learned and show mastery through just 1 or 2 quick questions. Exit tickets also give students the opportunity to assess their own metacognition, reflecting on how they learn the material and whether they truly understand the purpose of the lesson or not. And that's kind of like where the checklists fall in, like I just showed. The monologue that was written, they can use the checklist to help check their work for that before turning it in. A weakness I observed was with students completing exit tickets that often they can feel rushed, and due to in the expectation of getting their work done and being quick and brief about it, but also knowing that they have an assignment to do later or a workshop group to get to or to get cleaned up for a class. I noticed that sometimes that can put a stressor onto students. Some students also need more time to process their thoughts, and the time and pressure of having a quick check can interfere with their quality of work. Also, exit tickets sometimes only assess their short-term memory, as students are not always given the opportunity to provide details and explanations to engage in like a deeper analysis of their work. So sometimes I feel like maybe we need to go and think about what is another way I can refine these exit tickets so that way students are showing their overall understanding instead of just what was happening at that moment in time. My high achievers, a strength I observed with them was that high achieving students, when completing exit tickets, is that they often add additional details to demonstrate their understanding of material, adding in quotes and explanations. However, there are times that my high achievers are also thinking that it's too easy and they're done extremely quickly, where it wasn't really beneficial for me to help me understand their learning from that day. So a step that I would like to take is to differentiate my exit tickets better to match my students' needs, because I need to challenge my students, and not going to be able to do that if I'm giving all of them the same exit ticket based off their abilities in that day. So I want to make sure I have appropriate level passages or questions that I'm giving my learners to make sure that I'm addressing all of their needs. Struggling learners, I do value the exit tickets with them, as I can really dig deeper into finding out what concepts do they understand or do they not understand or they're having a difficulty with, and targeting those standards to support these students. I can reuse the same exit ticket later in a week or so after reteaching and see the difference from maybe reteaching a standard in small group 1 week to the next. I sometimes will give them the same exit ticket and compare their responses and see how we've improved. A challenge I have noticed also is that many of my struggling learners provide very vague answers. And it makes it difficult to determine whether they fully understand the material or not. They may be answering it to a bare minimum and not thinking about what more other detail can they put in. And then last but not least, I have my references listed here. All right, well, thank you for going over prompt 1 with me.